So, nice to be here. Sally very graciously, so at least you know my name, Sally very graciously introduced me. And before we do a little meditation, I'll just tell a little bit of, what would you call it, nuts and bolts about the Course. We'll talk about more nuts and bolts later also, but I think the idea of this kind of study program has been emphasized by Lama Zopa Rinpoche to provide within our own mandala, the FPMT, a place for people to be able to study the Buddhist teachings in depth. The way that our teachers did, in a sense, the same kind of texts that they studied after they studied the Lam Rim, and they might have had the occasional lecture and tantric empowerment. But my own teachers, I know I've always been impressed by their, not only their practice and their good heart, but the fact that they were also learned. And that's one of the qualities that's considered very important. So, although you might have the expectation that this will be just a nice, easy-going course, for the most part this one may be, we'll try to get a little bit of rigor involved in it, and it'll be a little bit, at times, demanding of your intellect. I happened to see on the internet the other day, someone mentioned that they had rented or bought Robert Thurman's, there was some video CD or DVD of his teachings on Buddhism. There was some review, you know how they have the users' reviews? And someone said, oh, this is so boring, it was misrepresented, it's just a lecture about Buddhism. And I thought, well, what did you expect? Hollywood, Hollywood drama or something like that. So if you've come and, I hope no one leaves here saying, oh, I don't want the DVD. That's something just like Robert Thurman's. I think probably Robert Thurman's DVD is very excellent, but so what I'm saying is that if you've come just for amusement alone, you might be disappointed. Okay. We will have an exam at the end, and hopefully most of you will have the courage to take that. Like when you do a tantric retreat, at the end of a retreat you do a fire puja, and you kind of settle in your mind, I've finished. And in the same way, an examination is a very good way intellectually and emotionally to put, what do we say in California now, modern days, closure on the whole experience of having done the Course. And so I would recommend to you that you think seriously about that, taking the Course for credit like that. And over time, we'll have a little, either a booklet or a certificate in which will be, every course that you do, there will be some seal that you've done that course at this institute or some other institute. And when all of the courses in the basic program are fulfilled, you'll be able to sit for a final exam and receive accreditation that would be something significant. I think many years ago in our mandala, there was a feeling we wanted to try to get accreditation from universities for the courses we gave. The universities are very hesitant unless you're giving their curriculum and taking all sorts of other kind of courses that we might not feel are so important in the evolution of spiritual development. And I came to the conclusion after some time that wasn't so important, that our own accreditation was perhaps more meaningful, as in the old tradition of the theological seminaries, where you sowed the seme, the seeds of spiritual realizations. And if you received some degree from a theological seminary, you were considered within that tradition someone who was a valid teacher within that tradition. So, although we may not offer you an MA or some other Western degree, the certificate at the end of this kind of course within the Dharma circle, I think, will carry some weight. So, why don't we begin with a little bit of meditation and motivation. Try to sit comfortably. Relax your body. Relax your mind. as I've mentioned sometimes, is it usually says in many sutras, the Buddha he sat and placed his attention on his breathing in front. So just focus your attention on the breathing as though it were a new exercise. And slowly let go of your wandering thoughts and the attention that you may be paying to the other senses. The eyes and the ears, especially the tactile sense. With an analytical mind that's recognizing when you're breathing in and when you're breathing out. Let go of other thoughts and just focus on that. You can use various antidotes to help to bring your attention back to the breathing. Just the alertness that recognizes you've gone astray and pulls back your attention. Begin as you notice the fish-like thoughts under the surface of your mind. Conceptual thoughts partially being paid attention to while you're watching the breathing. Try to extricate yourself from those. Put more and more of your attention just on the breathing. And after some time when the mind is partially beginning to clear, follow one breath up as though it were going to the crown of your head, down to your throat as you breathe in to your heart chakra. And leave your attention there. It's just a device to help you get away from the cerebral area where we tend to think we're thinking. And just at that location, centered there, withdraw your attention away from the senses like a tortoise withdrawing its limbs. And just watch the mind. Turning your attention inward rather than outward. Over time you'll see the consciousness itself has no particular color or shape. So if you sense a darkness because your eyes are partially closed, tell yourself that's not it. Let go of that. Let go of your attention to that. try to concentrate on the quiet instants at first between the thoughts. And when some disturbing thought comes, when an emotion or feeling or distraction comes, be alert to that and bring your attention back to what you sensed before, that quiet openness. The actual conventional nature of our mind. Our mind is actually of a nature what are called clear light. Transparent, reflective. The clarity in clear light can refer to its ability to reflect anything that impinges upon it, like a mirror, without effort. Also, it's non-obstruction to thoughts. It's immaterial nature. It's like a clear space, clear sky, within which all the various thoughts arise. Sense the flow of the mind. This clear light nature is what continues moment by moment, always unfolding from the previous moment. The various events within our mind, bird-like thoughts or the fish-like thoughts within the ocean of our mind, often not controlled by us. Their associations, their tenacity, due to karma, due to our distorted states of mind. But behind them all is this clear, spacious nature. For a few moments, let go of the sense of the body. Bring your attention away from that, because that's appearing to your mental consciousness just as a construct. Even the ego, the sense of an observer, different than the mind. That's just a construct also. You can take your attention away from that and refocus it on the substratum of the mind. Be like the proverbial dakini and soar in the spaciousness of your mind, even if it's not non-conceptual wisdom yet, something analogous to that. I'm thinking how incredibly fortunate we are to be human this one short time, although quickly passing. Incredibly valuable to set a direction for our future spiritual progress now. Perhaps to make great achievements this lifetime, spiritually, but at least to set up the causes for our future development, all the way to enlightenment. Many sentient beings within the universe are mothers. I like to think in the matrix of time, the tapestry of time, we've all, as filaments, our mind streams have embraced in various times and been separated at others. For the welfare of all those beings, all these mothers, who are, many of whom are protectors, many of whom will rely on us for their spiritual development, their eventual enlightenment. I'm going to participate not only tonight, but in this course, this whole life, that distant aim of developing myself totally, awakening from the sleep of ignorance to become enlightened, to perfectly serve sentient beings, effortlessly, spontaneously, with incredible compassion and knowledge, skillful means. For that reason, I'm going to tread the same path that our teachers, great beings of the past, have, and study, try to think about, put into practice the teachings on the training of the mind, Lujo, especially the wheel of weapons, destroying the demon of self-grasping. See if we can set a very strong motivation right at the beginning of this course, even the whole series of our teachings in the future. This is the only reason I'm doing this, not to become learned, to spout facts to others, to become admired by others, but to benefit myself and others, ultimately. Relax. Bring your attention back. Oh, good. I thought maybe there was a fire somewhere and you were, while I was meditating, you were clearing your throat to say there was something going on. Cold season. So, I don't consider myself either a scholar or a practitioner, or someone with just good heart. Those are sort of the qualities that they often attribute to practitioners. But somehow, maybe I created the karmic cause to have a chance to talk about the teachings, because I've had a very strong interest in studying, and had the incredible fortune of studying, actually fulfilling that wish, studying with my own teachers, Lama Supa Rinpoche, Lama Yeshe, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and his tutors, also some great Sergon Rinpoche, and many other great lamas. And I hope that, although I don't consider myself, especially in such a profound teaching like this, to know anything about it or to have actualized it, as my great teacher Geshe Sopa, whose commentary is in this book. If you have a chance to get, still might be worth our talking about it, kind of as discussion and study, and over time, when you have a chance to receive the blessings of this kind of teaching from other lamas, maybe that our groundwork now will, give rise to some sprouts. So this is the main text that we'll be studying, that Lama Zopa Rinpoche and some of his colleagues, the other Geshes who were Rinpoche consulted about what kind of curriculum to have. The particular text is one of the two texts that's in this, that's called they translated it as the Wheel Weapon Mind Training. I think some years ago in Dharamsala there was a translation. John Landau, our good friend John Landau, and Alex Burson and Sherpa Tulku and Kamala Rinpoche, they translated it and they called it the Wheel of Sharp Weapons. If you happen to have this, although the two fellows who helped Geshe-la in the scholarly side, quite scholarly, if you've read some of it, maybe sometimes they might seem a little bit skeptical of Tibetan tradition or Buddhist tradition, something. I almost get that feeling sometimes. I'm not sure. You can take that with a grain of salt, I think, and kind of skepticism. This particular kind of genre of teaching, do you know what this is? It's called the Lojong. Have you heard of that kind of teaching before? Do you know what the Lojong is? How would you say it, Lojong? How would you translate it into English? Transforming your mind. Lo, here, in a sense, it's a word that might be one of two Sanskrit words. It's not quite clear because we don't have the Sanskrit original. It might be the word that is referring to consciousness in general, like manas, or it might be, which we often, when we talk about Lorik, the course that we'll be teaching on Thursdays, awareness in general. We might also be talking another word that kind of means thinking or the thought. So in a sense, it has to do with training or purifying the mind or the thought, especially the two kinds of bodhicitta. The Lojong teachings became very famous in Tibet as an adjunct to the Lanrim teachings, which you've all heard of, right? The stages of the path teachings. Lojong, in a sense, seems like it's a different kind of thing, but it's a particular way of presenting the teachings to develop both the conventional bodhicitta, that we'll talk about more and more, to define if you don't already have a clear image of it, and what has come to be called the ultimate bodhicitta. Do you know what ultimate bodhicitta is? We talked about seminar last weekend.
Engaging bodhicitta. Taking on the action with wisdom.
I need one of those horns. Ultimate bodhicitta, we mentioned in the seminar, was within a bodhisattva's mind stream, someone who has conventional bodhicitta, sort of wishing to attain enlightenment for the welfare of all beings. It's their apprehension of ultimate truth. So their wisdom realizing emptiness directly. That's called ultimate bodhicitta. Usually we think of bodhicitta, we often use that in the Lanrim teachings, talking about, we might use it very loosely, meaning good heart. But here, when we talk about conventional bodhicitta, it does refer to that. When we talk about ultimate bodhicitta, it's referring to its adjunct, the wisdom realizing emptiness within the continuum of a bodhisattva. So it's, in a sense, it's held by or nurtured by conventional bodhicitta, the realization of the ultimate reality, ultimate bodhicitta, ultimate truth. So this this kind of tradition that came to Tibet finds its history in the teachings of Atisha, who came from India. I think you've all heard of Atisha. No? Anyone who doesn't know who Atisha was? Atisha was an Indian Buddhist whose sort of practice may have extended as a scholar, as a yogi, over a yogini, perhaps many lives, many lifetimes before. And in that lifetime, around the year 1000 of this era, common era, in that time, in the middle of that century, he came to Tibet. And we can talk about that story a little bit as time goes on. And he brought his own incredible experiences of both study of the vast expanse of Buddhist teachings and his practice of them, especially renowned his understanding of the lineage that he developed of the training of the mind. Mainly from, in the Tibetan tradition, we see it mainly from three gurus. You know who the famous one was? Do you know who his most famous guru was? Serlimpa, yeah. Actually, Serlimpa is the kind of like the nickname in a sense. Some of you may have heard of Serlimpa, right? Serlimpa means, I think, Suvarna Dvipa, means the golden island, the fellow from the golden island, and which was referring to maybe Java, and somewhere in Indonesia, where Atisha traveled from India by sea for a long period of time, very perilous journey, stayed for something like 13 years. So when Sally was saying this course, this kind of study might last 5 years, you might think, oh my gosh. I think Serlimpa, Atisha traveled to meet Serlimpa for some 13 months, I believe, also, 13 for some reason, and stayed for some more than 12 years, 13 years, studying especially the lineage that Serlimpa, whose ordination name was Dharmakirti, like the famous logician. Same name, but a different person. Actually, sometimes they say Dharmakirti was one of Atisha's main gurus, meaning Serlimpa. But he had probably previously to that two other gurus that influenced him very much about the training of the mind. Serlimpa was perhaps most prominent. One of them was called Maitri Yogi, or in the tantric texts, sometimes we receive initiations, like in the Rinchen Gyatso and the Nartan Gyatso, these many initiations. Many of them are traced back to Maitri Yogi. Sometimes it's written Maitri Jogi. And Maitri Yogi, I'm not familiar so much with his the text that he wrote, but he must have been a tantrika. Maybe that was the name of one of Atisha's original tantric gurus, one of his secret names. But there are some writings attributed to him, which I have not seen. But the third guru that was influential in developing Atisha's sort of development of bodhicitta and the whole thrust in Tibet was the author of this text, who is called Dharmarakshita. Dharmarakshita is the name of an individual who also taught. There's a little bit of doubt in the scriptures. I think most of the Tibetan scholars and the practitioners believe it's something like this. Dharmarakshita was one of Atisha's main gurus who nurtured him when he was first a monk and taught him the practice of the Shravaka path, the strict discipline that was prevalent still at the time, what we might sometimes refer to as the Hinayana path, or we might refer to as the Theravada today. Atisha actually took those vows. He took ordination when he was young, and Dharmarakshita apparently taught him the Abhidharma. You know what the Abhidharma is? Abhidharma means higher wisdom, one of the etymologies of that. So of the three baskets of Buddhist teachings, the Tripitaka, if you've heard of that, the Vinaya Pitaka, about discipline, the Sutra Pitaka, mainly, seems like it's about everything, but mainly talking about the methods to develop single point of concentration, higher training of concentration. And the Abhidharma Pitaka, mainly talking about higher wisdom, how to develop a higher kind of wisdom, especially in the lower Abhidharma, talking about the selflessness of persons, and then later in the Mahayana Abhidharma about emptiness of all phenomena. So he was Atisha's teacher, and sort of seems like quite close guide, guru, but perhaps someone who, because of the conditions that were existent in India at the time, where the Mahayana monks were integrated into the monasteries, where some were practicing also the Shravaka path. Kind of like you get the feeling that in Shantideva's case also, he was living in a monastery. Not only was he a practitioner of the Mahayana, Shantideva, you know who I'm talking about, right? Shantideva, who wrote the Bodhisattva Charyavatara. He also was a great tantric practitioner, and because of his secret practice, the people thought he had no realizations. So there may have been an intermixing, in a way, of practicing in different levels of the general Shravaka path, which we might call the Hinayana, the general Mahayana Bodhisattva path that are exemplified by these teachings, and even people practicing Tantra in secret, even living within the monasteries. Not banging their drums and blowing their trumpets at night, but practicing in a very secret way. So it seems that Dharmarakshita, who was the author of this text, was someone who took the guise of a Shravaka teacher and studied those texts to develop himself, but also having that interconnection with and exposure to the Mahayana, developed an incredible appreciation for and development of his own mind. Especially Atisha praised him for helping to develop compassion in Atisha's mind stream. And the two texts that are translated in this book are attributed to Dharmarakshita. So there's some scholarly debate about who he was, whether he was one of Atisha's sort of Lojong gurus. But generally in the tradition that's come down to us today, from the Kadampa tradition, it's considered that Dharmarakshita was one of these main Lojong teachers of Atisha, and someone very influential in developing Atisha's mind. So he apparently, it's said that he helped to translate, Atisha translated this text with his disciple Jondemba in Tibet. But there's some doubt about that, so you have to check for yourself. Usually when we talk about the training of the mind, it's worthwhile just sort of putting it a little bit in perspective. One of the other, this is one of the three famous Lojong texts. Okay, there were three gurus that were influential in development of Atisha's mind in terms of bodhicitta, like this, the training of the two bodhicittas. There are also three famous Lojong texts that we particularly study. Do you know what they are, by any chance?
7 points and 8 points. I always get those confused, but
7 points, 8 points, and 9 points?
no.
Oh, okay. I just...
Cut it out.
So that's right. I think that one of them is a very extensive teaching, elaborate teaching called the 7-point training of the mind, which is very much connected with Atisha's presentation of the teachings and is revered in all of the different Tibetan traditions. The Kargyus study it, the Nyingmas study it, the Sakyas study it, the Geluks study it, and they've sometimes had their own presentations of that. In fact, the text that is right here, the mind training like rays of the sun, is a commentary. Can I hold that up for a second? So people see. This is a commentary on the 7-point training of the mind that we'll be referring to sometime. And sort of very comprehensive and sequential, kind of like the stages of the path approach, everything in a sequential way, but still revolving around lyrical, poetic presentation, but still having an exposition that's quite logical and sequential. There's another teaching, not quite as extensive in its size, but just as profound, called the 8-point training of the mind. Have you heard of that? His Holiness often gives teachings on the 8-point training of the mind. That's considered one of the 3 great Lojong texts. And 8 verses. What did I say? 8 verses? Did I say that?
You said 8 points.
8 points. 8 verses. 8 verses of training of the mind. Sorry. 7 points, 8 verses. And that also is in that Kadampa lineage, the followers of Atisha. And if you're interested, you can find many different commentaries on that, especially by His Holiness. He's given many times a commentary on the 8 verses of training the mind. This particular text now, and so the 8 verses has a certain sequence to it also, but it may not be obvious at first, in kind of a sequence in developing the mind. This text doesn't have the same apparent sequence, the wheel of sharp weapons, or how does he translate it? The wheel weapon mind training. This doesn't apparently have the same kind of logical sequence, so we'll have to, in a sense, unless you're like the great saints of the past who were able to discern that hidden meaning, hidden agenda in there, we'll be reading it as inspiration and seemingly being able to touch various points at various times. Dharmarakshita, who was the author, is said to have, one of the little stories about him is that he at one point gave a piece of his flesh, what was it, a pound of flesh, cut from his thigh, for someone who needed to eat flesh for some infection or some wound that he had that had to be healed. And because of his training in his own mind, and compassion especially, Atisha praised his compassion. And so this kind of text comes out of that kind of tradition of that particular individual. I find it kind of interesting, so that maybe it can kind of inspire us that, and I think this is something that the Tibetans also took it to mean, that it is possible by studying the Buddha's general teachings, Sharlakyana, if you're also exposed to and have that nurturing of Mahayana, even if you're not attracted to it at first, you see by studying wisdom, you see the truth of it, the logic of the Mahayana, and you yourself can become a great practitioner of that. So this has a longer name. Here it's just called the Wheel Weapon Mind Training. Lojong Sonja Korlo. It doesn't have the phonetics here, but that's how one would pronounce it. As I mentioned before, Lojong kind of has the implication, sounds like, as one of the students here mentioned, she thinks of it as transformation of the mind. It apparently to the Tibetans, the scholars and the practitioners, it has the implication of both a method of purifying the mind, because Zhongguo can mean to purify, and also to train the mind, maybe development of the mind through purification, especially by training in the 2 bodhicittas, the conventional bodhicitta and the ultimate bodhicitta. So here, what seems on the surface, main thing it's talking about is training in conventional bodhicitta, in good heart, and developing an antidote to the main obstacle. I'm going to put a lot of adjectives there so it makes it too complicated. An antidote to the main obstacle to developing bodhicitta. Does that make sense? What's the main obstacle to developing bodhicitta?
Ego grasping at any appearances, but particularly.
Oh, okay. Is that right?
Sure.
Is there a difference? You said cherishing.
Self-cherishing.
Self-cherishing. Well, this is good. This is really good right at the start. Can you distinguish, do you know the difference between what's called self-grasping and self-cherishing? I'll get everyone's names slowly, so I don't know. What, I forget you. Yeah. Diana.
So self-grasping would be grasping like an inherently existing self. Self-cherishing, like based on grasping this inherently existing self, then we cherish ourselves.
Something like that. Self-grasping is the basic ignorance that is, say, renowned or criticized as the, renowned maybe is not the right word, as infamous as the root of our cyclic existence. And it has various varieties. The principal one is one, as Diana said, that's grasping to all phenomena as truly existent, some kind of findable reality there. I think, from what my teachers tell me, the real taste of that is first experienced, as in the Theravada teachings, when you first experience it with respect to the personal ego, when you see this I, this guy or gal that seems to be back there, the taster, the controller, the meditator, when you see that that doesn't actually exist the way that it so convincingly seems to exist, when you recognize that selflessness of the person, then you can start to see what it means, from what I understand, you can start to understand what it means that other outer phenomena are empty of some kind of self-existence. We attribute a similar kind of self, not like a living being, to the wristwatch or to your Toyota or your whatever. We attribute to all phenomena a certain kind of self-existence. And so that is what's called ego, that's what's called grasping to true existence. And when we talk about the difference between that kind of grasping, say grasping to the ego, first of all, when you talk about it with respect to the self, grasping to the sense of self. When we say grasping, here it doesn't mean kind of like, grasping at straws. It means apprehending that self and going along with it. What's the word? Assenting to it. Sometimes that gives me some flavor. I don't know, different words may give more meaning to you. And the language itself is just an aid in trying to find the right direction. So when we talk about self-grasping, it means a mind which is apprehending the sense of self and adhering to it, holding on to it, believing that it's true. It's an ignorant consciousness. It's a basic kind of ignorance. Actually, it's kind of a wisdom. It's called a misdirected wisdom, a distorted wisdom. You might say, well, how can ignorance be wisdom? Actually, it is. It's very nice to think that way because, when instead of thinking, I'm so ignorant, then you can think, wow, therefore I'm so wise. I have the potential to be so wise. One of my Dharma friends, one of the former nun, I thought she had very good perception of some things, talking about how many times people have very low esteem because we feel, I've got so much desire, I'm not a good Dharma practitioner, so much lust or so much attachment. But really that is itself also a misdirected, energy. That energy can be, if directed in the right direction, positive for your spiritual growth. It's something that can be constructive. All it is just, what we want to do is we want to be happy. But we're looking in the wrong direction for that. We're attached to things that don't really ultimately bring us happiness. Even in the short term, oftentimes, isn't it? Once we start to understand what is the cause of happiness, real Dharma happiness, that same energy can be changed and can be redirected into that more positive, constructive direction. So also, instead of thinking, I'm so desirous, so lustful, you think, I'm so desirous, so lustful. You can think of it as a positive quality too. So So that's on one hand. This is the self-grasping. But there's a difference. When we talk about the antidote to, I would say the obstacle to developing bodhicitta, that's not the main obstacle to developing bodhicitta. It's a mind that has developed because of that self-grasping that in Tibetan we call Rang Chenzin Gilo. Rang means self. Che means, or in that compound it sounds like Chen, but che, this word means to cherish, to really consider very important. Like your, I don't know what do you cherish? Your shawl. Probably some of you have very nice pashmini shawls or something, you cherish it, or your carpet or your car or something, or ourself, we cherish ourself. Something that you consider very, very precious. Rang Chen Zingi Lo, the same word lo, as in lojong. Maybe that's kind of the flavor of that lo, training to overcome, purifying that Rang Chen Zingi Lo. Maybe that's one of the meanings also. So this is not a Rang Chen Zingi Lo or self-cherishing, is a part of the complex of our mind of egoism. Egoism is a combination of grasping to the self, believing in it, which is then gives cause, gives condition for all the rest of the delusions to rise. But the other aspect of egoism that makes it even worse is our selfish attitude about it. I'm best. Not only do you conceive of the self, but this one is the one I have to protect and take care of. As my teacher Geshe Sopa often says many times at the beginning of his discourses, very, very profound discourses on wisdom and other things, Geshe trained very much in the bodhicitta for a long time, saying from his own experience how we always want ourselves to be, we always consider ourselves to be lovable. Others should love us. We should be considered right. Our opinion should be taken into consideration. And that kind of mind is more the Rang Chen Zingi Lo, the self-cherishing attitude, that part of the complex of egoism. So egoism, in a sense, our big enemy, there are two antidotes to it. The ultimate bodhicitta, the wisdom that realizes emptiness, is the antidote to the self-grasping, right? Bodhicitta, real cherishing of others more than ourself, is the antidote to the self-cherishing thought. So they themselves, those two thoughts, self-grasping and the self-cherishing thought, are kind of like the hindrances, the obstacles to developing bodhicitta, conventional bodhicitta, and ultimate bodhicitta. So just to put a little bit of perspective on that. So this text in its longer name, anyone has read it here somewhere? What's the actual longer name? Maybe it's on the, something like the wheel of sharp weapons, or the wheel weapon destroying the demon of self-cherishing, something like that. Let me see that. Oh gosh, must be in here. Anyway, we'll see that as it's on there. That's the actual longer name, and usually called Lojong Sonja Koro in short form. Okay, we'll see the longer form.
This translation, it's the wheel weapon that strikes at the enemy's vital spot.
Okay, that strikes at the enemy's vital spot. So that's a very, just in the title, there's a lot of important meaning there. The vital spot. What is the vital spot of the enemy? What is the enemy? Well, the enemy are these two minds. In one sense, it might seem that mainly the text is talking about the main enemy is the self-cherishing thought, but also it's talking about self-grasping. Those are, in the Lojong, it's training the mind to develop the two bodhicittas, so to develop an antidote and eliminate these two obstacles, self-cherishing and self-grasping. So that's the enemy. The vital spot. This is very, very interesting because, as I understand it, the flavor of it is a little bit like this. If you know the right way to do something, if you know the vital spot to attack something, you can do it very, very easily. Otherwise, you might flail away for a long, long time and not get anything done. Can you think of any examples like that? No. Worldly experience? Swimming? Yeah. If you know that's a good example. Yeah, if you know the right technique, you can go through the water very easily. Otherwise, maybe flailing. Maybe that gives you the feeling of flailing around. The examples, a couple of examples that are mentioned here also that in the Lodrong teachings. One of the most famous is what might seem a little bizarre to you at first. The skillful butcher, the slayer. Actually, you might say, why are they talking about butcher? Because here the text pays homage to Yamantaka. You know who Yamantaka is, or what Yamantaka is? Yeah, or we say, sometimes people say Yamantaka.
Yeah.
Yama means the Lord of Death. Antaka means someone who puts an end to, or like the Terminator, or the butcher. Maybe after I think Arnold, I like Arnold Schwarzenegger. We'll call it the Terminator of the Lord of Death. No, I'm joking. Anta actually means end, and Antaka means one who puts an end to, the Lord of Death. So I think in Sanskrit they put the emphasis like Yamantaka, although often we hear people say Yamantaka, right? You know what I'm talking about. Meditational deity, often associated in Tantra. So apparently, if indeed Dharma Rakshita was originally a Shravaka practitioner, studying the Abhidharma, studying the Mahayana teachings of Lodrong, also he had obviously, because of the allusion here all through the text to Yamantaka, he had a strong connection with Tantric teachings also. And there's that flavor of a combination of all of this learning of an individual, knowing the Buddhist scriptures, the whole Shravaka path, the Mahayana path, especially through the lineage of Shantideva, and then with Tantric understanding to enhance that, to quicken that. Perhaps that's why the Tibetans felt very special about this. So the vital spot, the butcher, that's what I mentioned in Yamantaka. It's kind of like the butcher of death. Oh, yeah, that's a signal. The different kinds of butchers. The worst butcher, someone like, would be someone who comes out with a club, maybe a cave person, comes out with a club and beats the poor animal. The butcher themselves being totally exhausted, the animal experiencing great hardship and taking a long time and maybe never even doing it. The animal maybe escapes. Somewhat middling, the middling butcher would be someone with maybe the axe, like we see in Nepal, right? You ever seen this kind of thing? I haven't seen the actual slaughter, but sometime before and after, coming up quietly, and maybe it takes several blows with the axe to kill the buffalo, let's say. Symbolic, often like the face of Yamantaka and Kalarupa, the various manifestations related with death, are often symbolizes the face of a buffalo. Do you know why? Why? Do you have any idea? Why buffalo? Why wasn't it like an antelope or a giraffe or something like that?
It's their base food, I would think, their sustenance and a lot of their clothing and tools.
Lama Tsopa Rinpoche was Lama Yeshe's disciple. Lama Yeshe was, he would say something like, Lama Tsopa Rinpoche makes me feel like a buffalo. Like the implication being, Lama took the aspect of being more relaxed. Things. The implication being, like a buffalo, we don't know that time is passing. That we're being led to the Lord of Death. Just like that buffalo is being led by the little girl by the nose. And we just go through life eating our cake and candy and having our minor stories and our, traumas and depressions, unbeknownst that we're being led to be slaughtered by the Lord of Death like that. And so Lama was actually praising Lama Zopa Rinpoche's enthusiasm, always making prostrations, always making mandala offerings, always busy, as though, time is short. So the skilled butcher is the one that knows the vital spot. I don't know if there's some, there must have been some like this. They have their little kit. Just open it up, some big needle. So they come up to the buffalo, they place their hand on the buffalo each. They place it in some vital spot. I'm not sure where it is. Where would it be? Behind the head somewhere? They place that needle in, the buffalo expires. If you know the vital spot without flaying around, you can cause the enemy to be destroyed. So although as gruesome as that may sound, you might not like any kind of evil-sounding analogies like that to be used. You might say, "Oh, that's un-Buddhist. We're vegetarians." Or something. There's great meaning to these kinds of analogies. So you keep an open mind. Also, like for some people, dislike the sort of militaristic, martial kind of analogies in Buddhism. Foe destroyer, things like that. The enemy destroyer or something like that. But there's great meaning to that, so keep an open mind. So the skillful. So here it's talking about. How did you read the timeline?
That strikes at the enemy's vital spot.
That strikes at the enemy's vital spot. The wheel of sharp weapons, or the wheel weapon that strikes at the enemy's vital spot. So the implication meaning, with skill in the two bodhicittas, you can help to destroy. If you know the right way to study, you can develop the wisdom to overcome your ignorance of self-grasping. You can develop bodhicitta that knows the vital spot to touch, that self-cherishing thought. Otherwise, your whole life, you're doing superficial meditations, you're saying words. It's good, you're creating some karma, of course, but you may be flailing around a lot and not making much progress. So somehow, I always admired that kind of explanation. Maybe I was a butcher in previous lives, I don't know the reason. But I've always admired that kind of explanation of this title. If you know the vital spot, the way to do something properly, you can make rapid progress. You may see analogies this coming week if you think about that. If you know the right way to do something, it makes a big difference. So that's what this is talking about, how to develop that wheel weapon, sharp weapon, which is going to destroy these two enemies, the vital spot. What's the vital spot? How do you get rid of self-cherishing thought? How do you get rid of ego grasping? We can just say, "Oh, you just meditate on shunyata." But what does that mean? You have to know you have to find the vital spot, how to meditate on shunyata, right? How to meditate, I'll just do tonglen. You know what tonglen is? Meditation of giving and taking. If you don't know the way to do that meditation, you could be doing it for years and not make much, you can't touch the self-cherishing thought. If you do it in the right way, in one 5-minute session, you can purify the karma that may be causing you to die right now. There's one individual, maybe you know the story of some individual, I believe, you know the story I'm thinking of? Some individual that had AIDS, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche mentioned to them how wonderful it would be if they meditated on compassion, I think also tonglen. And they did for some time, and then they had a remission, spontaneous remission. Is that the right word, spontaneous? And they went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "This is cool. What did you do?" And they said, "I did this meditation." And so they were very amazed, and he related this to Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And Rinpoche was very, very pleased and said, "Oh, how long did you meditate? Was it weeks or months or what?" And he said, No, it was just one session. It was so powerful that tears were streaming down his face, really feeling the suffering of others and wishing that he could experience that now for them in his suffering. This kind of like the vital spot, doing it in a very special way. Maybe he's someone that trained like that in the past, had very good karmic connection with it. We might just be, I'm breathing in the suffering of all sentient beings, breathing out all my good qualities. Doesn't, just saying that doesn't do anything. You have to know the vital spot. Okay. So I think that's kind of the flavor of the title here. The wheel of this Soncha Korlo. Soncha means weapon. It can be it usually means a sharp weapon, like like an axe or a whatever. But a Soncha Korlo means wheel or chakra. I can't remember the whole name in Sanskrit, but it's one of these weapons also that was mythologically existing in the Hindu mythology. One of the weapons of the gods. It was on the outside many sharp, like swords that, like in the meditation of Yamataka, if you're familiar with that. And there's a place to hold it in the center, and one would fling this at the enemies. One of the problems with that is very dangerous. If you don't do it right, you can imagine you're going to cut yourself. Or if one of the implications is that it can come back to you. You throw it in the wrong way, kind of like the boomerang. So one of the other flavors of this title, the wheel of sharp weapons, or the wheel weapon that strikes at the vital point of the enemy. Does it say self-cherishing or just says the enemy? The enemy's. Kind of one of the implications is by not practicing properly, observing karma, it comes back to you. And in fact, that's one of the refrains throughout this text again and again, kind of the flavor of it, that our actions done not out of wisdom, not done with cherishing of others, but just the opposite, done with self-grasping, done with self-cherishing thought, is going to come back to us. Instead of being a weapon that destroys these enemies, it comes back to us and destroys us, like in the various verses of the text. This is the wheel of sharp weapons coming back. This is kind of a reminder of karma on one level. So one of the flavors throughout the text is talking about the wisdom of understanding karma, that all of the events, all of the things that we experience now are the results of our actions in the past, rather than putting the blame outside. To take your attention away from putting the other person as the blame, or the organization, or the government, or whatever, and recognizing that the only way that you could experience this is having set that wheel in motion in the past. Maybe you thought you were going to be destroying your discontent by saying harsh words, or harming others, or stealing, or whatever, but that was a wheel that's going to come back to you. This is perhaps another flavor, another meaning of the title. Does it make a little sense? The wheel of sharp weapons striking the vital spot of the enemies. Here I think the more than one enemy, these two enemies, the self-grasping and the self-cherishing thought. What a stretch. 3-minute stretch. Yeah. Some people don't. Some very short. This is like. Did you get enough stretch? You didn't stretch at all. You didn't need. Okay. You do yoga?
No,
Okay.
I'd like to start. I need to.
You're just flexible, aren't you?
So the three main
Okay, so
texts-
we're gonna start now with your permission. Okay, very good. So Venerable asked if we could have a chance for questions. So first,
I was just going to say, you started to give us the list of three main texts. It's a 7-point mind training, 8 verses of training mind, and the wheel of sharp
and
weapons.
the wheel of sharp weapons, or the wheel weapon, however you want to translate it. Yeah, these are considered the three main Lojong texts that the Tibetans consider very sacred. There's a text called the Hundreds of Lojongs, Lojong gyatso. Gyatso means sort of hundreds, means lots. There's like maybe more than 100 in there. And these are all found in various versions of that. The 8th verse is one of the most famous in a sense because it's very brief, but very, very comprehensive. The 7-point training of the mind also very famous because it's very comprehensive and logical, and also poetic, if we have a chance to study that. And this also very famous because especially people who don't revere all of that logical progression, it's very poetic and very, very meaningful, and sort of maybe very tasty. So anyone want to ask some or make some observation or question then?
I wondered when you spoke about the difference between self-cherishing mind and the ego grasping. And I wasn't sure if you were meaning that in what extent are they two different minds? Are they actually two different minds that you can look, if you're really observing, okay, here's this self-grasping appearing, and here's another mind that's the self-cherishing. Do they appear differently like that? Can you actually...
Can you hear the question through your microphone? Or your earphone? Good question. I think they're distinct minds. They're distinct events. The self-grasping is generally, we would say generally, there might be some kind of philosophical debating point about something in general. In general, it's a mental factor that is either ignorance of the 6 root delusions, we say avidya or marikpa, either that, or another variation of it that's in those 6 root delusions also, the view of the transitory collection. The 6 root delusions, 6 root afflictions. You ever study that? You studied that. What are they? Greed. You're probably thinking of, it sounds like it has to be the list from 7 deadly sins or something like that.
Attachment.
So attachment perhaps is how we might also be translating it. Maybe that's how you could translate it, greed also. Greed, well, okay, attachment. What else? Anger. Pride.
Jealousy. No, doubt.
Doubt. A certain kind of doubt, afflicted doubt. Ignorance. So I put those 3 because those are kind of the 3 poisonous minds: ignorance, attachment, and hate, and anger, and then pride and afflicted doubt. Sometimes people say jealousy because in some presentations in Tantra, sometimes we talk about some other presentation, jealousy is involved in that, but that's not here. The 6th one is called afflicted view. View, not wrong view. In fact, this itself has 5. I like the finger thing here. Has 5 types. So there's 10 altogether. 5 views and 5 non-views that are called the root delusions. You could call 10 root delusions, or you could create 6 root delusions, right? Afflictions, right? If you call 6, the 6th one is afflicted view. That can be divided up into 5. So one of those is the famous one called wrong view. Okay, so the 6th one is not itself called wrong view. It's just many kinds of afflicted views. But the main principal one of these 6, usually when you enumerate them, the root of all of them is called, can be translated, the view of the transitory collection. It's very similar. It's a subset, let's say, of ignorance, of this 6 root delusions. Ignorance, if you may put it first. This first view is a subset of that. Does that sound too mathematical?
Can you actually make the distinction now between the afflicted view and ignorance? Because
the wrong view of the transitory collection of those afflicted views. Okay, this is the main one. That's the root. What it does is it views the what is your name again?
Bonnie.
Bonnie. let's say in Bonnie's continuum, in your mental continuum, there is a mind that it's referring to, this is something we'll talk about in low rig, it takes as its observed object, or the referential object, conventionally existent Bonnie, which does exist, merely imputed Bonnie. It's referring to that. But it apprehends it wrongly and believes that there is a truly existent Bonnie, truly existent self. So this is according to the tenets, the Prasangika tenets, highest tenets. So the wrong view of the transitory collection is like ignorance. It's grasping to true existence, but it's grasping to a particular thing as truly existent, to the self in your own continuum. Like if I think of Bonnie and I think, oh, Bonnie's the regional coordinator, she's truly existent regional coordinator, or, truly existent. That's not this view of the transitory collection. It's only within my own continuum, if I'm conceiving my own self-identity, referring to just the conventional George that does exist and misapprehending that, perceiving that to be truly existent, that's called the view of the transitory collection. It's not called the wrong view of the transitory, although it is wrong. It's called the view of the transitory collection. So in a sense, in the lower tenets, they take that to mean you view the transitory collection, that is the five aggregates. Does it make sense, collection? Collection of parts. You view, the lower tenets say it, the etymology is kind of like that. You view that transitory collection and conceive of it to be a permanent, partless, independent person, or self-supporting, substantially existent person. And various levels of subtlety. But the Prasangika say that's not exactly right. It actually views something that does exist. It is actually, it's referring to the referent objects, its observed object is the conventionally existent person, and it's misunderstanding that. It's conceiving it, the conventional person, the person, to be truly existent. So it's, and in the low-rig course, we'll talk about this kind of differentiation between referent object, observed object, and object which is being apprehended and so forth, and conceived. So that is an ignorance grasping to true existence, but it's of the various kinds of ignorance grasping to true existence. It's just one particular kind in my continuum, right? I have other ignorances grasping to this transmitter as truly existent, to your red jacket is truly existent, to the house is truly existent, to this book is truly existent. Many kinds of and also to my own aggregates. My form aggregate is truly existent. All of those are examples of ignorance in general. The wrong view, the view of the transitory collection, is just viewing one particular thing. The self-identity as truly existent. I forgot who asked that question. Was it me? No.
Bonnie asked that.
Well, I was just asking.
There's
a
another
different-
bigger one.
Okay, what's the bigger
That's
one?
part of that one.
Okay, what was it? I forgot.
It was just, is there a difference between the mind of, is the mind of self-grasping, of ego-grasping, the same mind as the self-cherishing mind? Or is it, can you identify them differently?
They are different. They are different. For instance, if they weren't different, we'd run into a lot of problems, because it's said that even the Hinayana Arhats, who have eliminated self-grasping, still have self-cherishing thought. So there are various levels of subtlety of it. In a sense, some part of self-cherishing is eliminated as you realize egolessness. I remember Lama Yeshe saying, the Mahayana path, the Bodhisattva, has self-cherishing thought until the end of the seventh bhumi, until the three pure bhumis, 8th, 9th, and 10th bhumis. So I think what he was meaning was, in a subtler sense, that there is a kind of there's a gross, maybe one could say, there's a gross self-cherishing that is the obstacle to developing bodhicitta. Then there's another kind of self-cherishing that is a remnant of the ignorance grasping to the self. Even when that ignorance, and so that kind of self-cherishing that's very related with self-grasping is eliminated as the self-grasping is eliminated. But then there's still a stain of that self-cherishing, that egoism, that complex of egoism. There's still a stain of that, and you know the famous example, right, of self-cherishing, like the odor in the sandalwood box. Or so you have a box, and you have sandalwood in it. You keep in India, you kept some of your linen, and then all of the linen would take on the odor, the fragrance of the sandalwood. Even when you took out the sandalwood, there still be the fragrance of the sandalwood inside. The kind of thing we think of is do you have it here? In the winter, in the summer, you put the woolens, in the spring you put the woolens in a big chest with what? Cedar, traditionally. Nowadays it's kind of like mothballs, right? Camphor or something like that. Even you take all that camphor out, or the cedar preferably, there's still an imprint of that. You know, you've taken out the gross thing, the camphor, the mothballs out of the thing, but there's still the imprint of that's imprinted itself into the box, stuck in there. Or they also mention garlic. You know, sometimes even you have some vessel with garlic in it, you take out the gross garlic and you clean it out, there's still some odor in that. So that the self-cherishing thought is, in a sense, encompassing various versions of that stain within our mind. Mainly there's a difference between how it acts. The self-grasping is a mind which is just apprehending the self and assenting to it, believing it, grasping to it. Once you've developed that, then, as a result of that, generally that's the root cause, then the self-cherishing thought can arise because of that. But we have the stain, we have a continuity of self-cherishing thought, self-cherishing attitude anyway, even when this self-grasping is eliminated, like the example of the mothballs or the cedar chips in the vessel. Even when the gross self-grasping is eliminated, when you see reality truly, when you become an Arya being, the path of seeing, still, for Hinayana Arhat, as they haven't been eliminating that self-cherishing, they have not been really taking as their main aim, recognizing to eliminate that as a stain. They don't recognize that as a stain. So that remains, and that impels them then to continue to work for their own nirvana. So that particular state of mind is different than the self-grasping. I think you've heard that before, but maybe just hearing it again in this context, maybe, does that help to answer your question, Lynn? It's something that we'll talk about again and again, because the differentiation between them, in general, is pretty different, the identification of them, but sometimes they may seem very, very close. Okay? Sometimes here it's not clear, probably is clear, but it's not clear to me sometimes which of the two is being referred to. Sometimes it can mean both. There's some verses that are very interesting, as we'll get to them, that are actually talking about one being the cause of the other, and sometimes the other being the cause of the first. I think in general you'd have to say logically, self-grasping is the original cause of self-cherishing. But you could argue, if it's the cause of self-cherishing, when you eliminated self-grasping, that should go, right? But it's the original cause, so that stain continues after the self-grasping. Does it make sense to you? So it's something we'll investigate. And I think for my own mind, a helpful way to think about it is think of this complex of egoism as a general thing. And within it, there are a couple of components. This component of self-grasping and grasping the other phenomena as truly existent. But particularly when you talk about Rangchen Zingilo, self-cherishing, its counterpart, especially, it's not just grasping to my glasses or other things, but particularly grasping to the self, and grasping in the sense of believing it. To identify that's very, very crucial. That's like one of the vital points. To get the right point. You have to identify what that ignorance is doing. Identify the object of negation, because that, in a sense, is one of the objects of negation. It's called the object of negation that does exist. Right? You know that usually the object of negation is that you might say the truly existent self, right? That's an object of negation. Does that exist, the truly existent self? No. So you say that's a non-existent object of negation. It's something that you have to recognize as non-existent. But there's also, in a sense, there's an object of negation or refutation which does exist. That is the ignorance grasping to it, because that has to be refuted also. That has to be overcome. So there's sometimes like a differentiation in that. So some of you, as in any group, there'll be people at many different levels. Those of you who are hearing some of these things for the first time might think, oh gosh, this is way over my head, I shouldn't have come, I could have been watching The Sopranos. Is The Sopranos something like that? But don't worry, hopefully, you know, Angie, some other people are older students, and some of you may even have other deeper questions that you want to inquire, so we try to accommodate everything. So anyone else have something they'd like to explore for a minute? Any question about what we said tonight? Or this text? Yeah. Well, tell me your name, I'll try to imprint it.
Frank.
Frank.
So it said that during this, for this 15 days, one's karma is multiplied, many times.
Wait, so right now, because some people are watching, will be watching this tape or this video, this DVD or something like that. This is, what are we, this is Losar, which is after Losar. Tomorrow is the full moon, the first full moon after the beginning of the lunar year. So these first 15 days are said to be very karmically potent. Yeah.
I'm trying to come up with an explanation for why karma should be multiplied instead of the same as it was the day before.
Mm-hmm. This is interesting. It's interesting. There's like multiple days, like, oh, today the karmas are multiplied. It almost sounds like the Pope decreed or something like that. Right? Today's a good day to go to the Vatican and give $1 million or something like that, or the Dalai Lama. It's not just, there is some kind of synchronicity in events. We notice, like, what was called Kala Chakra? Have you ever heard of Kala Chakra, Tantra? Kala Chakra. Do you know what that means, Kala Chakra?
Wheel of time.
Kala, doesn't Kala mean black? Mahakala? Actually, they're related. Same. He says, when we say, your time has come, it's sort of the implication, the word black and time also are related like that. And time also in the sense of your time being finished, death and so forth. Kala Chakra means the wheel of time, just as usually. And there's a outer, inner, secret, different kinds of Kala Chakra. In a sense, there is an explanation, there's acceptance in Buddhism of a certain synchronicity. When certain things are happening in the outer world, certain things are happening within us. And we might, as modern people that believe in science, we might try to find some causal relationship between them. Oh, the fluids in our body are moving like the tides in the ocean as the moon goes. There might be something there. But also sometimes you might call them acausal. Things are happening because of general karma ripening at the same time in various places. I think there's something related in this kind of thing when, certain times that the Buddha did great deeds, and it's not just our commemorating them. There is something in the cycle of time that, as that was the time the Buddha did something, there is some repercussion at that time. He did it at that time as an omniscient being for a particular reason. Not only for the people at that time, because it would have ramifications in other cycles. So that's how I look at it. I haven't heard, maybe that accords with what little I've heard the Lamas talking about that. Maybe others have heard other explanations. But that's how I understand it, that Well, let's say spatially also, not just time-wise. That would be a time-wise, doing something at a particular time, saying it has more power. Also certain places, like we believe, maybe it's more easy for us to believe that going to Bodh Gaya, doing prostrations in Bodh Gaya, where Buddha attained enlightenment, we say, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's more powerful karmically. Or to make prostrations to my guru is more powerful karmically to make prostrations to the dog or to the wall. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to us, spatially or in terms of the object. So I think there's another extension in terms of time. Does that help at all? Yeah. Okay.
That just raised a question for me. So does that mean, in order for that to work, because things have power, like if you do an act towards a holy object versus an ordinary object, it has more power. Does that imply that there is some kind of awareness that all beings have in order to be able to have like the intention so that their karma is directed toward in these holy days? Does that mean there's some, I don't know, one of them to say like subliminal awareness? Or does this multiplication of karma only count for people who know about it? Is there a being who wouldn't know about it at some level?
I think it might be like this. It's like, for instance, sometimes people say, oh yeah, karma. Yeah, that if, you Buddhists, you believe in karma, you'll go to hell for killing, but we don't believe in karma, so we're not going to go to hell. Yeah. Or the lions who prey on other animals, or the tigers that kill other animals. Oh, for them, they don't believe in karma, so that's no... And of course, for them, they have to eat that flesh, so for them to kill another animal, there's no repercussions. What would you say about that?
I think you could easily argue that there's some innate awareness, though, of even because of our self-cherishing, that we wouldn't want that done to us. So even at that most basic level, I think there's an awareness. So our actions tied to awareness.
The lion wouldn't want that done to them, but I'm not sure that is why.
If you have no intention, can you create karma? If you have no awareness and no intention.
Sure. Sure. You could step on ants and things like that.
Is it possible to have no awareness and no intention?
You can, as you're walking along, you can accidentally step on ants, and that can have some karmic repercussion. Even you walk, you see an image of the Buddha, or you walk around a stupa, you had no idea that stupa was there. There's some karmic from the side of the object, from the synchronicity, doing things at a particular time, at a particular place. But even to be there, from a Buddhist perspective, means you've created the karma in the past to be there. Like we go to Bodh Gaya sometimes, we see the poor people there, poor dogs with what's called mange or something, and we think, oh, the poor, they're just miserable. Actually, in some ways, they may be incredibly fortunate to be there, to have the karma to be there at that time. There's the incredible mixed karma. So, good questions. So what I would like to see, Brian, one last question.
Could I ask you to spell a couple of the terms that you used?
Okay, I'll try. Okay.
Translation of self-cherishing, Rang Chen Zin Yilo.
Rang, R-A-N-G. Like if we're just, you don't mean in Tibetan, you mean like phonetically, right? Yeah. R-A-N-G, Rang, not Rang, as in wrangling and ding dong. Rang. Che, actually it's C-H-E, but because the next word in Tibetan has a certain vowel at the beginning, it's pronounced Chen, almost like C-H-A-N or C-H-E-N. Rang Chen Zin, maybe D-Z-I-N, Zin. Rang Chen Zin Gi, G-Y, Lo, L-O. So Lo means mind or awareness, as in Lo Zhong. Gi is a genitive particle, means of. Rang Chen Zin. Zin means to hold, to grasp. Zinpa means to apprehend, to grasp. Especially in this complex, it means grasping, holding tightly. Che means precious or dear. So to hold as dear, that Chen Zin, those two words together, means to cherish, to hold as dear. Maybe that helps sometimes to understand better. What's meant here, this cherishing thought means to hold the self, the rang chen zin hilo, to hold the self as dear. So it's a little bit different, like when in the Venerable's question, what's the difference? Is there a difference between self-grasping and self-cherishing? This is a mind that has, on the basis of a self, either is manifest, the person has not realized emptiness, or because of the remnant of that, still thinking the self is very important. I have to attain nirvana. I have to do this. I have to be happy. Others, not so important. Actually, I wanted to read something in here that I thought was very topical. Let's see if I can find it here. It's talking about this egocentric thoughts, especially self-cherishing. With this kind of attitude, you put yourself at the center. If you want to look later, it's on page 45, at the bottom. With this kind of attitude, you put yourself at the center. You hold I, self, or me, as paramount, and feel that everything is mine, that it belongs to me, that I possess it. Sounds like America, doesn't it? This type of thinking starts with my mind, meaning my mental continuum, my body, and continues from there to my house, my family, my property. You can have so much mine that it can go on and on forever. So he's quoting a verse of Shantideva's here. Since all calamities, fears, and sufferings in the world have arisen from self-clinging, meaning self-grasping, what have I to do with that great demon? It's a rhetorical question. I should get rid of it. So in this verse, Shantideva is saying that the root cause of attachment and hatred is the egoistic view of a real personal identity. When you have this wrong view of a real personal identity, then you also have what is called self-cherishing. Okay, different self-cherishing attitude, rang chen zigi lo, sometimes translating lo as attitude. This means preferring yourself, your mind, and body to the exclusion of others. Before you hear the Buddha's teachings, you will always be inclined to the egoistic view, the view of a real personal identity. Later, you'll see through study that this view is faulty and harmful, but you'll still not be able to attack it. You won't get the vital point. You'll continue to hold on to that part of your mind and be influenced by others. That wasn't the phrase I wanted. That was just important, but that wasn't what I said. Okay. I was just afraid that by the next class we may be in war, right? There was something here that was very remnant, brought that to mind, how the self-cherishing mind sees faults with others, sees our side as, me, our side is right, others is wrong. So really the root, in a sense. And when you do the training of the mind, especially when you're talking about the conventional bodhicitta, especially looking at the self-cherishing thought, you put all the faults on that, even though in a sense you could also put all the faults on the self-grasping. Sometimes when you're especially working on the conventional bodhicitta, you put all the faults on the self-cherishing. All of the negative karma, all the things I'm experiencing is because of this selfish, egoistic view, the self-cherishing. It's impelled me in numberless lives before to create actions out of attachment, out of anger, out of ignorance, pride, jealousy, all of these different things. And that's a very, very powerful way of not acceding to that, to develop some recognition that that's the real enemy, not outside. Okay, one ultimate last question.
Okay, I was thinking about this self-grasping thing, and I'm just wondering if maybe one way to look at it is that, everything is literally connected to everything else. And so if I'm looking for this I somewhere, dissecting, trying to find it maybe in a smaller and smaller place somewhere inside, I suppose, itself. it's always going to be connected with something around it. So it's like there's no,
If you're looking for that I.
that I,
Mhm.
it's always, if I separate that I, it's always surrounded by something else. So where do you make the separation? Can you sort of look at it like that?
You can. This is not a theory, what Lord Buddha was talking about. It's something for meditation. To actually inquire in your own experience. Not just saying, oh, Buddha said there's no self, therefore there's no self. It's not like that. You actually inquire in your own mind. You watch until you see how it appears. Sometimes it might appear that I is the body. If someone says, Beth, you're looking great. Oh, how young you look. Oh, did you lose some weight? Oh, yes. You would associate with the body. Other times people might say, are you clever? You know, the ego sort of identifies with the mind at that time. Oh, yes. I'm quite. Or you were dumb. You know, we might associate with. Sometimes it might be the feelings. Like, I am angry. You know, or we talk about the emotions. One of the other compositional factors. But in the end, over a long period of time observing, letting these other transient observations of the self disappear, there's a sense of self constantly there, subtle most one, that you have to observe in meditation. That's what we'll be talking about in the course. Okay. So let's just spend a couple minutes to dedicate at the end. Beginning, middle, and end, very important. So we tried to set at the beginning a good motivation, kept concentration in the middle. Try to perform the action of listening and participating well. So first calm your mind. Watch your breathing for a short time. And as we'll say in the Luri class, see if you can develop a subsequent cognition, a remembering consciousness in this case, of the clarity of the mind. Try to go back into that meditative quiet again. Continuity of your mind stream, actually pure, clear from the beginning, only temporarily obscured by these various thought patterns, emotions, impulses. And within that clear mind, think, this evening I've created some virtuous karma, especially because of the motivation at the beginning, thinking about Mahayana teachings. Due to this result, due to this cause, karmic cause, the imprints left in my mind stream, I will definitely experience some pleasure within cyclic existence, contaminated pleasure, because our minds don't yet have uncontaminated wisdom. We may call it pleasure in cyclic existence, but rather than it ripening in some way that I just experience it one time in the future, with egoism gone, I'm going to dedicate this merit, make a strong wish. May it become a cause of my continued spiritual development up to and including Buddhahood. May this be one more causal element in developing that state for the welfare of myself and all beings. My self-perfect aim to develop the Dharmakaya, no more problems, total bliss, the welfare of sentient beings, the ability to emanate the various form bodies, that teach the Dharma. Due to this merit, may I quickly develop the two bodhicittas, the basis of renunciation, ascend the Bodhisattva path, have the fortune to meet Tantra in this very life, and achieve enlightenment very, very quickly for the welfare of all sentient beings. Thank you for that. So I just mentioned for next time, if you have a chance to read the first 7, 8 verses, and we'll be talking about we'll be talking about them going into detail. Sort of divide up maybe 8, maybe 9 verses, and we'll start going into the commentary of the actual text next time. And if you have a chance, excellent. If you have a chance to get this book, very excellent commentary by Churnoff, background material.